Hello all, welcome to the video Introduction to Views Part 1 from SQL Server eTraining.com. My name is Satish. As part of today's agenda, we will see what is a view, what are the uses of view, what are the different types of view, and then at the end of this video, we will try to create a view and then we will modify and delete a view. So let's get started. So what is a view? A view is a virtual table that gets its contents from a query. The contents means the columns and the records and then the data values. And then what is a query? A query is nothing but a select statement that we write to get the data from one table or multiple tables. So if we want to get the data from one table, we just write select star from table. And then if we want to get data from multiple tables, we use joins. So this is called query. This query can be written as a definition inside a view. And then this definition will be given a name with view underscore customers or something. Okay, and then we can use that view in the same fashion as we use the table. Okay, so if we have a table called customers, if we want to get the data from that table, we just say select star from customers. So if we want to create a view on top of this table, so we will just say select star from table, and this query we will put it as a definition inside a view, and then we will give it a name saying vw underscore customers. Okay, so if you want to query the table, you can say select star from customers, or you can also use the view which has the same definition of the table. So you can just say select star from view underscore customers. So both queries will return the same data. Okay, so the table has both columns and rows, and then the data values will be stored in a data pages inside a database. But then for a view, it has columns and records, but it does not have any data stored in the database. The columns and records also will be generated dynamically from the query that is inside the view definition. Okay, so the view itself does not store any data in a database. It will just store the definition of the query. And then whatever the definition of the query is there, whatever columns it will pull and whatever the records it will pull, that contents will be used by the view and then it will show up. Okay, so we will have more clear once we try to create the structure of the view, and then once we try how to use the view. Okay, but then the view as a definition, it says it's just a logical table that gets all its contents called columns or records or data values from a query. Okay, so let's see what are the uses of view. So let's just put in one statement. View is a virtual table that gets the contents from a query. Okay, so let's see what are the uses of view. One views we can say is for security reasons. Okay, so if we have a table called customers and then we have all customers details in this customer table, let's say first name, last name, email ID, password, and then the SSN. So if you have this information in customer table, which is very sensitive data, so the sensitive data in this table are the SSN and then the password. The sensitive data means you don't want to expose this data to users. Okay, so The users of your company, if they want to look at the customer details, okay, let's say if they want to look at first name, last name, and then email ID, or if they want to use this table to work with the application, okay, and then you don't want to expose the sensitive data. So what you have to do, you can create a view which just pulls three columns: the first name, last name, and email ID. And then the user, the password and SSN are not shown in the view. So you can give access to all the users just to this view instead of to the table, and then you can ask them to use that view instead of table. And then you can restrict the usage of, or the read permissions or to all the users. Okay, so instead of using that table, or instead of granting access to the users to the table, you can just grant access to the view, and then that way they can only view non-sensitive data. Okay, so that's one use. We can also see other use, like if you have, okay, that use is called backward compatibility. Okay, so what is backward compatibility? So whenever you are trying to use a table in your application development code, okay, so for example, you started developing an application, and then you are trying to, you have few tables which you want to view in your development code. Okay, so you use this table in various places of your code. It may be Java, or it may be stored procedures, or it may be anything. Okay, but then in future, if the table structure got changed, or if the schema of the table got changed, like new columns got added, or existing columns got renamed, or the table itself got renamed, okay, so all this happens during the development process. So if that happens, if a table name changed, or if the existing column name changed, or if the data type of the column got changed, so you have to change all your code everywhere in the application wherever you used it. Okay, so instead of that, if you just have created a view, okay, you can, and then you have, if you have used that view everywhere in your code, okay, so even if the table structure got changed, all you have to change in the view, and then your view is anyhow used in all your applications, so you don't have to change all the application code. Okay, all you have to change is just the view, and then that will be reflected everywhere in your application. Okay, so that's called backward compatible, and then that's one other use of view. The other use is it improves the performance. Okay, so how does it improve the performance? Let's say you have your database in another state, and then you are working on a client machine in some other place, in some other state, and then if you are trying to pull data daily from that particular table, okay, or let's say few tables, and then you write some 10-line code, okay, which pulls the data whatever you want. So for pulling the data from that server in some other state, your code will be sent through the network. Okay, so the network size, if it's 10 KB, let's say, okay, instead of this, so all this code needs to go to the server, and then it needs to get back the data. Okay, so instead of sending this code, you can create a view, and then all you have to just send is the view name to the other state where your server is residing, and then it get back the data. So that way you don't have to send the 10 KB of your code. Instead you can just say let's say 1 KB of code, and then you get your data back. Okay, so that's how you reduce the network traffic by using a view. So if the network traffic is less, you will get your data faster. So that's how you improve the performance by using a view. Now let's see what are the different types of view we have. So the first one is called the indexed view. By looking at the name itself, we can say a view with index is called indexed view. Okay, so if you just write a query and then give it a name, if that's called a view, all the data in that view or all the data values that are output of that view will not be stored in a database. That is a regular view, okay, or a basic view. But then if you try to create an index on that view, all the data will be saved in the same way as a table. Okay, so once you create an index, the data will be saved in the database, and then whenever you are trying to use that view, it will get the data from the stored data. Okay, so that is called an indexed view. We will try to create an indexed view and then we will see how we can work with the indexed views. Okay, but then the indexed view is nothing but a view with a clustered index created on it. Okay, so that way the data will be stored in a database, and then the performance will also be increased if the data is stored in the database. So it don't have to compute all your calculations inside the query. Okay, so once the data is calculated or it's computed, and then it will be stored in a database for an indexed view, and then whenever you are trying to reference that indexed view, it will get the data directly from the table. Okay, so that is called an indexed view. Let's see what is a partitioned view. A partitioned view is nothing but it will get the data from multiple tables, or it will join the tables horizontally, not vertically. Okay, so if you think about just the regular joins like inner join, left join, right join, these are joining two tables vertically. That means by column. Okay, so if you have 10 columns in the left table, and then if you have 10 columns in the right table, okay, so you can get 4 columns from the left table and then 3 columns from the right table by using left join. Okay, but then that is called vertical joining of tables. But then what is horizontal joining? It's nothing but it's unioning the data from two tables. That means you are combining the data from two tables. If you have 10 columns and then 10 records in the first table, and then you should have same 10 columns, but then it may have more than 10 records or any number of records, but the column structure need to be same from both the tables. Okay, so it will get all the data from both the tables. Okay, so let's say we have customer information for the year 2010 in one server, and then we have customer information for year 2011 in another server, and then we are trying to use these two tables in completely a different server. Okay, so you can use the two different tables from two different servers, or you can create a view, and then inside that view you can get the data from these two tables. Okay, and then you can use that view instead of using the two tables. Okay, so that is called a partitioned view. Alright, so let's see what are system views. System views are nothing but the views that are created by SQL Server instance at the time of installation. Okay, they are created by the system. You don't have to create the view. Okay, they are already created with all the definition written inside that view. Okay, so why do we need these system views? Okay, so these system views actually will be used to pull all the metadata information of your database. Okay, let's say you have created a database and then in that you have created 10 tables. Okay, so all the tables, all the table names, the columns which are inside the table, and then the column data types, all this information is called metadata, and then this metadata is saved in a database called a resource database, which is a read-only database, and then we don't have access to that database directly. Okay, so all this metadata information, whichever users try to create in a database, all that information, it may be table, it may be stored procedure, a view, it may be anything, all that metadata information will be saved inside the resource database in a system tables. And then as we don't have access to the system tables, system views are created on top of these system tables to look at the metadata information inside the resource database. Okay, so we can use system views to look at all the metadata information of the databases in that particular instance. So that is called a system view. So if we try to create our own view, then that is called a user defined view. Okay, so if we try to create a view for our purpose, it's called a user defined view, but then system views are created by the system. Now let's look at how do we create a view or modify and delete a view. So I have SQL Server Management Studio open. So the queries I'll be working against SQL Server e-training database. Okay, so first I'll try to get the data from a table that I already have. Let's say I have the customers table, and then if I want to look at the data in the customers table, I have the select star from customers. Okay, let's try to add SSN and password to this table. So I will have to use the alter command, alter table, and then the table name, and then add SSN, let's say integer, and then not null. Let's put it as null. Okay, so similarly I want to add another column, password, and then varchar 100 null. Okay, so I'll try to update that table. I'll just update with some dummy data. Okay, similarly for third record, so I have the data updated, and also similarly the password. Let's say P1, P2, P3. Now if I look at the data in the table, I have first name, last name, user ID, and then SSN and password. So these two columns are sensitive data which I don't want to expose to the users. Okay, so what I will do is I'll try to create a view. So the syntax for the view is create view and then the view name as and then your select query. Okay, so let's try to create a view. So let's say view customers and then as. So whatever you want to put in here, the select star from customers, you can just write the same query. Instead of that star, you can just say whatever columns you want to show. So let's say customer ID and then customer first name, last name, and then the user ID. Okay, only you want to view, only you want to show these columns to the user. Okay, so once you have that, just execute it and then you can see that view has been created under views folder. Okay, so inside the database you can see under views, and then if you click refresh, you can see the view underscore customers got created. If you want to look at the definition of the view, you can just right click that and then script view create to new query window. Okay, so that's the default database properties and then that's the definition of your view. So how do you use this view? So it's the same way as a table. So just say select star from, instead of the table name just provide the view and then it shows those columns: customer ID, customer first name, last name, and user ID. Okay, so you can also filter the data by using a where clause, or you can use group by clause, order by clause, whichever clause you want to use. You can use the view in the same way as a table. Okay, so if we want to create, let's create another view which gets the data from customers and also the address table. Okay, so let's try to write a query. Let's say select star from customers C and then inner join address table on C dot customer ID is equal to A dot customer ID. Okay, and then in place of star I want to use C dot customer first name, C dot customer last name, and C dot user ID, and then similarly A dot address line 1, A dot address line 2. Let's say you can do address line 1 plus address line 2 as address, and then A dot city, A dot state. Okay, so you can also have some static data. Okay, so let's say get date as date value or something. Okay, so you want to, if you run that query, you can see all these details. Okay, so you can so the address is null. So if we look at the address table, we can see one of the address line is null. So when it's concatenating these two strings, it's putting as null because null plus anything is null. Okay, so if you try to use a function called is null, and then if it's null, just do an empty string. So if you run that query, you can see the address also showed up, and then the city, Texas, and then the date value. Now if you want to create a view for this, so whenever you are trying to use this query, in all your applications to get the customer details. Okay, so you don't have to write all this query again and again. Okay, so instead of that, all you can do is just create a view with customer details and then as. So just create that. So it says command completed successfully. And then now if you want to look at the data, okay, so you can get the same data back. So instead of using that table directly in all your application, you can just use the view name. Okay, so if you have used this query in 10 different places in your application code, okay, and then if something got changed, like the address line 2 got changed from line 2 to line 3 or something, okay, or if they are trying to add address line 3 also, concatenating that, so you have to change in 10 different places. So instead of that, if you are trying to use that view name in all your application code, so if you are trying to add a new address line, the third column, so all you can do is just do that address line 3, the new column, and then once you have that query, you can execute that query or change the structure of the query, okay, by doing an alter. So that's how you change the definition of query. Just replace the create with alter, and then you can execute that query, and then that query, that latest details will be reflected in all your code. Okay, so the address details will show up as address line 1 plus 2 plus address line 3. Okay, so that is how you use or you create views. Okay, so we also talked about the alter command. It's just by replacing the create with an alter command and then just try to execute it, that definition will be altered. So you can also do it from the tool, click on the views, and then if you want to alter it, script view as alter and then new query window. So you can change the structure whatever you want. If you want to add another columns or something, you can add it and then you can run that particular query. Okay, so for dropping a view, you can just say drop view and then provide the view name, so it will be dropped. Or you can also right click on the view and then just delete it. Okay, so however way you want. So that is all about views in today's session. In my next video, part 2, I will talk about how to create an indexed view, how to create a partitioned view, and then we can also create the view with the different options called check option or encryption if you don't want to others to view the definition of the view. For example, in some projects you may want to have a business logic which you don't want to expose it to all the users. Okay, so you will have to create a view with encryption so that no one can view the logic in that view, but then they can use the view. Okay, but then they cannot view the definition or the logic inside that view. Okay, similarly we can also talk about the schema binding and then other option called the view metadata. At the end of that video, I will also discuss few limitations of the view. Thank you all for attending this video session.